Tonight, holiday headache, sky-high gas prices on the road, and packed planes in the air.
Plus, forbidden worship.
If you don't have religious freedom around the world for everybody, every time, all the time, and governments enforce that, you are going to have the clash of civilization.
Religious persecution across the globe is growing more deadly and more dangerous.
And rolling out the red carpet. The GLITZY GALA at the Museum of the Bible, honoring leaders of the African American Church.
All this and more on Faith Nation.
Fourth of July holiday weekend woes. Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Tara Merchiner. Tonight, as we head into Independence Day weekend, millions of Americans are set to pay record high gas prices on the road and experience daunting delays and cancellations in the air.
The historically high inflationary pain comes with strains to the broader economy on the heels of the S&P 500 posting the worst mid-year performance since 1970. The increased demand for gas, travel, and food over the 4th coincides with the release of the government's Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, showing average prices rose more than 8.5% over the last year. A daily reminder of that pain coming at the pump, with gas roughly $5 a gallon, some states, Tara, averaging well over that.
Incredible. And if you're taking to the air, prepare for a slog. Thousands of canceled or delayed flights with more travelers and fewer airline workers, unfortunately. Frustrated pilots are picketing, demanding better schedules and better pay.
We've now flown more overtime in the first 6 months of this year than we did in 2018 and 2019 combined. And in those years, those were record years for the airline industry.
And one airline estimates it won't return to normal staffing levels until sometime this winter. TSA says its workers are ready for the increased 4th of July travel with 1,000 workers on standby.
Well, tonight marks only 1 week since the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Still sorting through the shockwaves, the president today meeting with Democratic governors and imploring Congress to codify Roe into federal law, even as the real battle over abortion now heads to the states.
And I share the public outrage at this extremist court that's committed to moving America backwards with fewer rights, less autonomy, and politicians invading the most personal decisions.
In a change of tone, the president says he now supports ending the Senate filibuster to pass a federal abortion law, which is the so-called nuclear option. Democrats do not, though, have the votes to pull that off.
And growing fears tonight that what is already a crisis on our southern border is about to get even worse. Earlier this week, the Supreme Court siding with President Biden's effort to end the Remain in Mexico policy. The Trump-era policy required some migrants to wait in Mexico while their cases are heard. Republicans say the decision will only supercharge the flow of illegal immigration, which has had deadly consequences just this week. What you're looking at now is reportedly a caravan of about 2,000 people said to be headed from Mexico to the U.S. border as we speak. 4 migrants died Thursday and 3 others were injured in a highway accident in Texas that authorities describe as a human smuggling attempt. Officials say it was the second incident in just 24 hours. 2 more migrants died in a crash while fleeing authorities near the border. Law enforcement is pleading with the Biden administration for help.
I think between those of us that are here with eyes on the problem every day and those in D.C. that are the top decision makers, I think we can reach some sort of an understanding to try to truly make a difference in this issue.
Census data suggests the number of illegal entries grew by 1.4 million since Inauguration Day in 2021, but some estimates show the growth may be as large as 2 million people.
Well, here with us now is Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill. Julia, thanks for joining us tonight. Let's start with the Supreme Court, which handed down a rare win to the Biden administration, siding with the White House in its bid to end the Remain in Mexico immigration policy, which of course started under former President Trump. Still, there's no foreseeable end to the humanitarian crisis at the southern border. Julia, how big of an issue could immigration be in the midterm elections?
Oh, I think it's going to be a huge issue, John. And we are actually even seeing that play out in some of the primaries and the special elections we've seen along those southern border districts. I can tell you about Texas's 34th congressional district with Republican Myra Flores flipping that seat from Democrat to Republican. She was talking quite a bit about the issue of border security, border patrolling, that kind of a thing. So it seems like it's a good message for Republicans. On top of that, you also have a lot of moderate Democrats who aren't even necessarily located by the border, who are talking about the border on the campaign trail, including Senator Maggie Hassan, who's from New Hampshire, Henry Cuellar, whose district is right along the southern border in the 28th Congressional District of Texas, and then also Mark Kelly in Arizona. So, you're hearing Republicans and moderate Democrats zero into this issue because they know it's resonating really across the country with voters.
Julie, the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade is sending the political world into a tailspin as states scramble to enact trigger laws outlawing or upholding abortions all across the country. It's also highlighting this country's deep political divide. Is this going to be a galvanizing force for Democrats or Republicans, or for both this election year?
Well, I think Democrats are certainly hoping it's going to be a galvanizing force. We know that a number of abortion rights or pro-choice organizations have launched a number of very expensive ad buys in states like Pennsylvania, Nevada, for example, very much trying to galvanize their vote ahead of those states' Senate races. However, when you look at a lot of polling, the majority of Americans, yes, do disagree with the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, their views on abortion tend to, they tend to be more against abortion as you get closer to that third trimester. However, when it comes to abortion being a galvanizing factor, that's really unclear because polling and studies also show that abortion isn't really a top concern for a lot of voters, especially when you have soaring gas prices, inflation, the issue of crime. So I think Democrats are hoping it's a galvanizing issue, but I don't know if it necessarily will be.
All right, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great holiday weekend.
You too.
All right, the biblical mandate to care for the modern-day widow and orphan takes on new meaning now that Roe v. Wade is no longer the law of the land.
But who will help pregnant moms and the children who might have been aborted with a chance at life? Christian foster care and adoption agencies are challenging the church to answer the renewed call. Caitlin Burke explains.
Nearly a year ago, when Texas enacted the most restrictive abortion law in the country, there was a significant increase of women considering adoption.
It probably started about 45 days after the Texas heartbeat bill went into effect. A lot of the women who were calling us just had questions about adoption.
Sherry Statler, head of Christian Homes and Family Services in Tyler, Texas, says it's happening again with the Roe v. Wade decision.
It's been a very busy week. We're just thrilled that they call us, and we're happy to help them sort out their options related to the pregnancy, but also help them deal with lots of other crises that they have going on in their lives.
The Supreme Court's action also triggered anti-abortion legislation in nearly half the country. Now, both critics and supporters of the pro-life movement are calling for renewed focus on life beyond birth.
Now it's time, with the potential demand for supporting families or women or teenagers who are facing unplanned pregnancies, helping more children who get placed in the foster care, whatever that looks like, we have to be ready to do more.
Michelle Douglas is the program director for The Call, a nonprofit in Arkansas mobilizing local churches to serve children and youth placed in foster care. She says the Bible is clear on the role of the church.
Undefiled religion is this, to care for orphans and widows in their distress. And so we're really good at the widow, the traditional widow and the traditional orphan. But the modern day orphan is the child in foster care. And the modern day widow is often their mother who's doing it alone.
While post-Roe children will be adopted into loving families, more will likely also be born into households strained by addiction, poverty, and mental illness. Without support, those kids could end up going into an already strained foster care system.
What we've tried to do for years is help people see the urgency. And so I think maybe this has kind of heightened senses and kind of helped people to realize, hey, there are 400,000 kids in the foster care system today. 100,000 of those are waiting to be adopted. Maybe I could step out and act and say yes today.
Christy Irwin, founder and executive director of Project Zero, helps families adopt foster children. She acknowledges many in the church have been working in this space for years, and that more is needed now than ever.
We need to all take a good internal look at ourselves and be willing just to put our yes on the table. That's really what it is putting our yes on the table, whatever that yes ends up being.
These leaders point out that taking a child into your home isn't the only way to help. Other options could look like providing meals to a foster family, helping with diaper drives, or a financial donation. Support comes in many forms and on all levels. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Great reminders. Thank you, Caitlin. Around the world, the practice of faith can be dangerous, even deadly. Why religious persecution is growing in the 21st century and where it's worst. Coming up. And welcome back. Israel's political scene once again thrown into disarray with its parliament officially dissolved and new elections scheduled for this fall. The new Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid taking the reins from Naftali Bennett that you see there. Bennett announcing that he would not run in the upcoming elections to be held November 1st. Those elections, Israel's fifth in 3.5 years, give opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu a chance to return to power.
And while the Middle East has seen some bright spots like friendlier relations between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors, religious persecution is growing and becoming more deadly worldwide.
That's right. As Jennifer Wishon reports, a diverse international coalition resolved to do everything in its power to stop it.
Here in the nation's capital, there are few issues that unite both ends of the political spectrum. One is the life-changing work of ending religious persecution around the globe. Billions live where their ability to worship is restricted or forbidden, from genocide in China to Nigeria, where church bombings are all too routine.
If you don't have religious freedom around the world for everybody, every time, all the time, and governments enforce that, you are going to have the clash of civilizations.
Each year, Washington becomes the focal point for work toward a world where all people can worship without fear. Victim stories are heartbreaking.
My name is Yuhan. I came from China, Beijing.
Yuhan's father was killed for practicing Falun Gong. When her family finally got access to his body, they were shocked.
The incision stretched from his throat all the way down to his abdomen. And when they pressed his abdomen, they found that the incision, his abdomen was stuffed with hard ice. And my father's organ had been harvested while he was still alive. I cannot imagine, I couldn't imagine what he had suffered before he died.
There's too many stories that have never been told. They've never been, no one know about them. There's so many people are suffering.
Persecution survivor Maryam Ibrahim recounts her story in the new book, Shackled. One woman's dramatic triumph over persecution, gender abuse, and a death sentence. Ibrahim says she felt led to share God's will.
Because the only thing I did, I accept that will, and I continue trusting God during the trial, imprisonment, and knowing that I count my days before I get executed, knowing that I'll never be able to see my children again. And now, coming out of that situation, every day I wake up with a miracle in my life, being able to get my children ready for the school, you know, to prepare their lunch, and to do what I do today is all His work.
U.S. law requires the Commission on International Religious Freedom to maintain a list of prisoners of conscience around the world.
The most important thing is to put a human face on the tragedy.
Rabbi Cooper says hateful anti-Semitism taught in parts of the Middle East has been exported to the West via social media. He points to recent efforts by Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, based in Vermont, to boycott the Jewish state of Israel.
These are people more at home with Hamas than with American values.
And while the summit is focused on persecution abroad, victims urge Americans to guard their freedoms.
Liberty is taken away incrementally. It's not all at once. And in most cases, it's not overnight.
They say America must remain a beacon for the world.
They look to our principles to say, well, here's a country that's getting it right when it comes to freedom. That's something that we can't lose hold of.
Rabbi Cooper says there's a sleeping giant in America that could change millions of lives.
If you can get every church in the U.S. to adopt one church in Nigeria, just one church, church to church, people to people, things will change there very quickly. Because if we wait for governments to figure this out, we're just going to keep reading over and over again about the body count of the faithful going up.
And now the work continues to change policies that are hurting so many. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
All right, coming up, we introduce you to 7 pastors who are a testament to the past and are blazing pathways for others to follow in the future. Next. All right, if you are a fan of gospel music, you are going to love our next story. John, you got to meet and hear some gospel recording greats last week.
That's right, Tara. It was for a ceremony to honor 7 modern-day pioneers who've contributed to the church, the country, and beyond. I was there, and in this next piece, we're going to take you back to see some of the highlights. Here in the heart of the nation's capital, the Museum of the Bible transformed into a one-night red carpet gala event to honor the leaders and pioneers of the African-American church over the last several decades. Glitzy gowns and the stirring sound of gospel music filled the museum halls for the first Blessing of the Elders ceremony. The purpose? To honor trailblazing pastors in the Black church and recognize their overall contributions to the American religious experience.
Are we here to have a good time?
The star-studded evening included gospel recording artists B.B. Winans and Erica Campbell as hosts, with musical performances by Fred Hammond, Lecrae, the Clark Sisters, and more. The packed theater honored 2 women, Bishop Vashti McKenzie and pastor and singer Shirley Caesar.
I'm standing in a building that represents the Lord. It represents the Word of God. And so I feel like I'm being represented too.
And 5 men, Pastor Tony Evans, Bishop Charles Blake, civil rights leader John Perkins, Bishop T.D. Jakes, and Pastor A.R. Bernard. The ceremony also symbolic of the passing of the baton to the next wave of preachers and teachers. And even some of Hollywood's biggest names came to pay homage.
Man gives the award, God gives the reward.
In his acceptance speech, Pastor Bernard highlighted the Black church's roots in slavery, adding that the institution was really born out of the system of segregation, when literal walls separated worship between fellow believers.
We did not mimic the white Christian church in America. We actually created a parallel with our own identity, our own hymns, our own style of preaching and worship that was initially rooted in our slave experience. So it became central to the Black community. It preserved Black history and Black tradition.
At first, the Black church gave African Americans a sense of dignity and grew to form a basis for community and activism. More recently, during the pandemic, it lent its credibility as a public health partner, setting up clinics in Black neighborhoods. Another issue at the top of the list, confronting crime, something Bishop McKenzie, the first woman to lead the AME Church, said requires Christians to be bold and bound in unity.
Stand firm in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Even though God will send you into hostile places, stand firm.
You cannot talk about America and not talk about the Black church.
Organizers and historians agree the impact of the Black church reaches beyond color, noting how it served as the conscience of America in the fight for civil rights and modeled reconciliation and love in the wake of tragedies like the massacre at Mother Emanuel Church, where the families of the victims memorably forgave the shooter.
And I think that the Black church is poised to really be the bridge builder in a very divided nation.
A belief echoed by others.
So when we can come together and say that God teaches us that we are all equally loved, valued, and appreciated by our Creator God, then it helps us come together and unify and serve the one God that we all love.
From Moses to Joshua, Elijah to Elisha, Naomi and Ruth, and Jesus and the disciples, the blessing of the elder and passing the torch can be seen throughout Scripture, transferring vision and legacy from one generation to the next. At this inaugural event, leaders not only acknowledged the history and influence of the Black church, but a future where there's one unified church reconciled in love, promoting the good news to bring healing to a divided nation and a broken world. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
You know the saying, it is never too late for love. When we come back, we'll show you a couple who is proving it to be true next on Faith Nation. All right, finally tonight, we're going to say it again. It is never too late for love, John, right?
That's absolutely right.
And for the couple you are about to meet, their burgeoning affection is proof.
Well, not too long ago, love seemed elusive for the two lovebirds, pushing close to their 80s, after each lost their respective spouses after more than 50 years of marriage. Tom Zurcher and Lucinda Nestor served as caregivers for their spouses from their first marriages, both of whom died after painful battles with cancer. But now the Worcester, Ohio couple, who knew each other decades prior before reconnecting as widows, are set to get married tomorrow. It's a story years in the making for Lucinda, who, after her husband Jim passed away, said, quote, "I thought my life was over." After finding love, though, so late in life, a second time around with her new fiancé, Tom, Nestor says, "I really do believe that God is looking out for us." And what a true love story.
Exactly. We want to mention that is the aunt of our videographer, one of our editors, Rich Westfall. And we wish them all the best.
Thanks, Rich, for sharing that story with us, and congratulations on love. Thanks so much for watching this edition of Faith Nation.
Have a great 4th of July weekend. Be safe.